We're going to be talking about systems and how systems relate to biology in today's video. So let's talk about what a system is first. A system is a set of interconnected components that are able to produce a function that individually they would not be able to accomplish on their own. So here we have a cellular device. This is our system. And we can see that we've broken this cell phone into its constituent components, or the things that make it up. And the battery would not be able to do much unless it had something to power, like the circuit board or the antenna or the screen. And the screen wouldn't be able to do much unless it had the circuit board to tell it what kind of images to display. These are all components that work together to make the cell phone or the system function. The system can be described as open, closed, or isolated. We're mostly going to focus on open and closed systems. In biology, we're not going to talk a lot about isolated systems. So an open system is where inputs and outputs can flow freely through the system. So an input is something that comes into the system. The output is something that is produced by the system. So an open system, those things move freely. Inputs can include energy or matter in this case. Outputs, same thing, energy or matter. In a closed system, inputs and outputs are limited in some way. Systems also have to control the responses they have to inputs. And often the way a system controls its response is through the use of feedback. Feedback is basically when a system produces an output that interferes with the way an input is analyzed. So here we have a thermostat. This is an example of a control. So let's say this thermostat is controlling the temperature of a room. We have the set temperature that we want to have the room get to, which is 78 degrees. And what's going to happen is the thermostat has a thermometer embedded in its circuitry. And when the thermometer senses that the room is not at the desired temperature, it will either kick on the heater or turn on the air conditioning to get to the desired temperature. When the air in the room changes to meet the desired temperature, the thermostat will then tell the air conditioning or the heater to turn off. So now the output, the heated or cooled air, has interacted or changed the input that the system received, and now has stopped the system from interacting with that input. And that's a basic way for you to kind of understand how feedback works. This idea that an output then interrupts an input. We're going to be talking about lots of different ways to study and analyze systems in this class. And what that is called modeling. We're going to model lots of different systems, and we're going to do that in lots of different ways. We could build a physical model, like you see this picture of DNA here. This is a physical model that shows a structure of the DNA molecule. We could also build conceptual models, which could be a flow chart or a diagram that kind of illustrates how that component works within the larger system. We could use mathematical models to kind of predict what would happen if we changed something about the system. And simulations can kind of help us predict and also help us visualize at the same time if something were altered within the system. So let's talk a little bit about biological systems. To do that, I need to clear up some vocabulary you're going to hear. The first one is the emergent property. An emergent property is a characteristic that is not found at a lower level or in the component parts of a system. So it's kind of the unique aspect of each level in a biological system. The other aspect that you need, the other vocabulary terms you need to know are biotic and abiotic. Abiotic are non-living things, biotic are living things. So these are some quick vocabulary terms that we're going to utilize on the next slide. So here are the levels of organization that we use in biology. The first is the atom. The atom is the basic unit of matter. That's its emergent property. You have things that are smaller than the atom, but they don't function as matter. So the emergent property of this level is that it is the basic unit of matter. Atoms can link together to form molecules, and those molecules can link together to form organelles. And organelles are functional units within a cell, and the cell has the emergent property of being the basic unit of life. There are smaller things than a cell, but none of them function as a living thing until we get to the cellular level. Cells can link together to form tissues, and those tissues can link together to form an organ. And at each level, they can do a new function that before they could not do. And when you put an organ together, if you put organs together, they can form an organ system. Like here we have the nervous system, which is made up of the brain, and we also have nerve endings in the rest of the body. And that organ system helps to produce different things about that organism. It can tell, in this case, it can tell muscles to move. It can store memories. It can help sense and kind of interpret the surroundings that the organism finds itself in. So we have these organ systems that make up an organism, and those organ systems work together to help keep the organism alive. And that organism functions as a living thing. That's kind of the thing we recognize as a living thing. That organism is part of a species, and the way we reference that in the levels of organization is called a population. So these are all the living things of the same species living in an area. Then we have the community, which is all the biotic factors living in an area. So this would include the large kelp forests. This would include the fish living in this area. This would, of course, include the sea lions living in this area. When you add in the abiotic factors, you get an ecosystem. So the ecosystem includes things like water quality, sunlight availability, soil quality. Those are all aspects of the ecosystem. Then, this one is not represented on my slide, but it is one I want to make sure you understand, and that's the biome. The biome is all of the places on our planet that have the same ecosystem. So we have rainforests in the Amazon River Basin, but we also have rainforests in Southeast Asia and also in Africa. And when we put all those biomes together, we get the biosphere, which is the system of all living things on our planet.